Hello and welcome to another episode of the For the Property Investor podcast. And we're here with the weekly news, and the only man that brings us the weekly news is Nick Bendel. Hello, Nick. How are we?
Oh, I'm going very, very well. Great to see you again, Owen.
Fantastic. Good to see you too. And glad to see you finally got the memo that the uniform is the plain black t-shirt on this
Yes,
podcast.
I've got the plain black t-shirt. I am wearing white socks though, which rather spoils the look.
That's all right. We don't need to know. You don't need to show us either.
Okay, well, that'll just be our little secret.
Yes. But what's been happening in your world for the past week?
Oh, it was a really good week. All sorts of things happened. My business, for those who don't know, Hunter and Scribe, it's a copywriting agency that writes content for finance and property professionals. We work with lots and lots of brokers. And one highlight that occurred during the week, a client texted me from a mortgage broking conference he was attending, and he sent me a photo in the text message. And I was surprised to discover that this particular mortgage broking group had put a photo of me on their big screen at the conference as an example of someone who could help them with their content marketing needs.
Wow, that's
Yes,
brilliant.
it was brilliant. I thought to myself, doesn't this group have better taste? But it was a very nice surprise.
And how much business did you get as a result? Was your phone ringing off the wall?
Not just yet. So I'll put it at $0 so far, but the only way's up.
Yes, true. Good to hear. It's always nice when people send you photos of yourself on a big screen.
Yeah, that is nice. And how's your week been?
Been pretty busy. I'm in the process of interviewing to be hiring for more staff, which is means that we're growing.
Mm.
And so all good news. But it's always busy time when you're interviewing for staff, because it means that you're busy and you need more staff. So yeah, there you go. But so that's been my past week, as well as the usual lots of leasing, onboarding new managements, and everything else that happens in property management.
Well, wonderful. Well, I'm glad we've both had productive weeks. Are you ready for our first story?
Yes, what's in the news this week, Nick? What's our first story?
First home buyers getting locked out of more and more markets. Affordability for first home buyers worsened in 2025, despite the three rate cuts that occurred during the year, according to new research from Domain. Domain assumed that the typical first home buyer was a couple aged 25 to 34 that wanted to buy an entry-level home with a 20% deposit. Based on those parameters, the time to save a deposit for a house increased by 11 months in Brisbane, 10 months in Sydney, Perth and Adelaide, 7 months in Darwin, 3 months in Melbourne, 2 months in Hobart and 1 month in Canberra. And the time to save for a unit deposit also increased in 6 of the 8 capital cities. Domain's Chief of Research and Economics, Nicola Powell, said, "What's most concerning is that this is no longer just a Sydney problem. Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth, once seen as more attainable, have seen rapid growth in entry-level prices, pushing them much closer to the least affordable markets. Units have traditionally been the stepping stone into home ownership, but even that pathway is narrowing. In several capitals, unit buyers are now stretching themselves into mortgage stress." So, Owen, Nicola Powell from Domain said first home buyers are being locked out of more markets than ever before, and those who do manage to buy are taking on greater financial risk than at any time in the past decade. So I'm wondering, is she right or is she being alarmist?
Well, if they are borrowing more money because house prices are going up, and also if they're paying more for the property and buying at a higher loan to value ratio, so that means with a less of a deposit, then yes, that's fairly obvious that they would be taking on a lot more financial risk. And seeing that we've got all of those federal governments schemes now to be able to buy with a 5% deposit, then all of this is really not that surprising. It's that property prices are going up as a result, and more first home buyers are struggling to get in because the demand side of things has just been fueled with more government subsidies.
Interesting you mentioned various government programs because governments at both federal and state level have been talking about wanting to solve the problem. And yet we see prices going up. And when I say prices going up, I'm not talking so much in absolute terms, but relative to incomes. Property prices have been rising faster than incomes, which means entering the market keeps getting harder and harder for first home buyers. Governments talk the talk, but do you think they have the political will to actually solve the problem?
Um, well, we can only hope, Nick. It's because the problem needs to be solved, but it seems to be something that the solution and the finish line to the solution is so far down the track now that it's past the end of their next term in politics. So if they want to stay in power, then they need to do something politically to be able to score those points and get those votes. So unfortunately, the votes seem to be with fueling the demand side of things and not fixing the root of the problem, which is the supply side of things.
With younger Australians finding it harder to buy their first home, we're seeing more people renting and renting for longer. When we talk about housing affordability, we tend to focus just on the buying side of the equation. But if there are more renters than ever before, and if that number or if that share is going to keep increasing, I'm wondering, do we need to think more holistically about affordability to include both buyers and renters?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We should be. It's because it's becoming more and more popular for buyers to not be buying where they want to live, where they're buying to invest because that's where they can get into the market. So it's I think we're going to see a larger proportion of people renting where they need to or want to live, but most definitely buying investment properties where they can afford to, especially if there's any change to capital gains tax discounts and as well as any negative gearing um, uh, benefits in the tax system.
We've spoken before about the link between affordability and housing supply, and that is a very nice segue into our next story. Left-wing think tank offers solution to Sydney's affordability problem. A policy analyst from the Grattan Institute has proposed a major planning reform aimed at easing Sydney's housing shortage. Matthew Bowles argued the New South Wales government should allow townhouses and low-rise apartments across most residential zone land, following a similar approach adopted in Victoria. Bowles said that while the government had introduced reforms to encourage high-density housing near transport hubs, the changes still left much gentle density illegal in many suburbs. Allowing terraces and three-storey flats in low-density areas could significantly increase housing supply, he argued. Grattan estimates such reforms could create capacity for more than 1 million additional homes in Sydney, with hundreds of thousands potentially profitable to build today. Bowles said similar planning changes in Auckland triggered a construction boom and helped reduce rents, suggesting comparable reforms could improve housing affordability in Sydney. Interesting idea, Owen. So the New South Wales government now allows mid and high-rise apartments around 60 transit hubs. However, unlike in Victoria, New South Wales does not allow townhouses and apartments up to 3 stories in most other parts of the city. Is that a mistake?
I don't think it's a mistake. It's called planning, and it's as a result, the New South Wales state government built more metro lines, and guess what? Around those stations, there were changes in the zoning so that a lot more high rise and higher density could be built, and so that's helped. It's if we're looking at being able to build more, we can't get things approved and built in areas where we do have the zoning available. So just because you rezone areas for higher density doesn't mean you're going to magically come up with more trades and more building approvals to be able to get through council and get these new buildings built. So yes, even in low density areas where you can build new house and land areas, they're taking just as long to get approved for subdivision, and then all the civil works done so that we can get them all built. Every step of the process is slowing down the process of getting new homes built. So, yeah, while it's a very basic, not a bad idea, it's still not going to be a solution to the problem because yes, we can't even get properties built where the zoning exists.
What about the broader proposition that if Sydney is going to become more affordable, the city has to become denser? We have to build up rather than out, and people just need to suck it up and accept that there are going to be more townhouses and apartments. Is that a fair enough call?
Oh yeah, absolutely, and that was the purpose of the metro lines being built, so that we could put more higher density apartments, especially around these stations. And but if you start adding in three-story units everywhere across the Sydney metro basin, you'd be in a situation where you'd be causing traffic problems if they're not close to sufficient public transport. So let's focus on proper planning and having them built where around sufficient public transport before we start building them willy-nilly all over the place.
Do you think Sydney has a NIMBY problem? Sydney have, could there be more housing in Sydney if not for all these naughty NIMBYs that are blocking development?
Oh yeah, absolutely, and that's part of the problem where you've got people objecting to development, and in their backyards when they've lived there for 20, 30, 40 plus years, and they liked it when they moved in, and they don't want things to change. So they don't want it to change in their backyard. But unfortunately, if you want to keep that lifestyle, then maybe you need to move to a different area further out where it's doesn't exist. It's change or be the change, or you will be affected by the change.
Did you read that in a fortune cookie? That sounded quite good.
No, I always get the same one in the fortune cookie. It says this insert has a plastic coating, so it's just like I don't understand the whole process.
Well, let's move on to our final story for today. Energy efficiency ratings broadened to cover older homes. Australia's nationwide house energy rating scheme, or NATHERS, is being expanded to allow energy ratings for existing homes, marking a significant shift in how residential energy performance is measured. Historically, NATHERS ratings have applied only to new homes and major renovations, helping ensure new builds meet minimum energy efficiency standards. However, under the expanded program, trained assessors will also be able to rate established properties, giving owners, buyers and renters clearer information about a home's energy performance. The initiative forms part of a broader push by federal and state governments to improve housing energy efficiency and reduce emissions from the residential sector. Governments are also developing a national framework for disclosing home energy ratings at the point of sale or lease, although decisions on whether disclosure becomes mandatory will be made by individual states and territories. Owen, you have a national property management business, Leafield, which operates in 5 states. So you're very, very close to what's going on in the property market across the country. Would you support state governments making it mandatory for all homeowners to get a NABERS rating for their home?
Um, well, it's just pushing more compliance and you know more Big Brother onto people and where they live, isn't it? It's you know I know we need to have higher energy efficiency standards, and you know it's but is it instead of forcing people to get a license or a piece of paper to say they're efficient, you know, why don't we add a carrot where they can get cheaper electricity rates if they comply, and but not make it compulsory. Yeah, why do we just get lumped with more compliance, more regulation that costs the taxpayer more to be able to uh, monitor and police and enforce? Yeah, why can't we think outside the square?
Well, let me play devil's advocate here. When seatbelts were made compulsory, people were saying, this is Big Brother, heavy hand of government. Why can't they just lay off? Now, I think the vast majority of people would tell you that compulsory seatbelts are a good idea. Is it possible you're overreacting?
Um, No, Nick, it's not possible that I'm overreacting. It's but I understand where you're coming from, and but that's a matter of personal safety, and it's and yes, I remember when um, my parents certainly talked about when because I certainly don't remember when seatbelts came in, and it's and yes, it seemed onerous and but the number one thing is it saved lives.
Hmm?
It wasn't permanent. You could actually take your seatbelt off when you got out of the car. So it's not something that you had to carry around with you for the rest of your life. It didn't necessarily cost you more. I mean, all cars are made with that. So when it became a manufacturing feature and you weren't paying any more for seatbelts, well, it was kind of obvious to make it compulsory. It's but yeah, most importantly, you can take it off. Where other things that the government has tried to impose on its citizens in the last number of years, you couldn't actually take off. So, it's yes, but in terms of getting your home energy efficient, well, if that saves you money, then it's probably a good idea. But not everyone could necessarily afford to do it straight away. So,
Hmm.
yes, maybe it could be something that is done at the time of a sale of a property, or it could be done at some other time that change is happening, and it could be made efficient then. So a bit like when a property is being renovated and it needs to go through council approval at that stage. If things weren't up to code, but it was built before the codes were came into effect, then you didn't necessarily, depending on what it was, of course, you didn't necessarily have to update it. But if you were doing a renovation and you were changing things, then you needed to bring everything up to code at that stage. So, yes, along those lines, that would be palatable.
Okay, let's say it does become compulsory for homeowners to disclose energy ratings, perhaps when they're selling and or leasing their home. Would that affect sale and rental prices?
Um, no, not necessarily. You're going to have people who are unable to do it.
But what
that
if, so sorry to interrupt, what if I'm a
yeah.
buyer and I've got to choose between two homes, and I now know because of the compulsory ratings that one home's energy efficient and one isn't, am I going to pay more for the one that is energy efficient? Or if I'm a tenant, am I going to pay more rent for the home that's energy efficient compared to the one that isn't?
No, well, more likely the onus would be on the seller of the property to make it efficient. Otherwise, it would have to be a condition of the sale. So in that situation, I don't think there'd be an issue there. With leasing property, I mean, there's so much compliance on properties that are on the rental market, and adding one more complexity. Yes, that would tip some people over the edge and just decide to sell up altogether. But others will come into the market as investors and be okay with it from that period of time.
Speaking of leasing, so I mentioned earlier that your business, Leafield, you operate in 5 states. I'm wondering, how common is it for tenants to ask about energy ratings and energy efficiency?
Unfortunately, with the lack of supply in the market, most people's priorities are about getting the size and location of property that they want. If they get property that's efficient, energy efficient, then it's just a bonus for them.
Well, another great chat today, Owen. Thanks for your time. My takeaways are yes to compulsory seat belts, yes to compulsory fortune cookies, but no to compulsory energy ratings.
Yes, but certainly encourage the better energy efficiency. But let's not add more compliance and red tape to our lives.
Thank you for your time, and I will see you again next week.
See you then, Nick.